Well, let's talk about Ghana's economic recovery, because Joy News is learning that Ghanaian authorities are unable to reach relevant officials in China, making it difficult for negotiations to commence on the country's proposal for a domestic debt restructuring. For now, a planned trip by Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta to China has been put on hold as Ghana pursues all available diplomatic channels in a bid to convince the country's biggest external creditor to accept Ghana's proposal for a debt relief. For days now, the government of Ghana has been engaging the German government and its officials to use their leverage in the Paris Club of G20 to convince China to accept the debt restructuring. However, addressing a press a while ago, the German ambassador to Ghana, Daniel Kroll, says there will be a need for more hands on deck to actually encourage China to sign up to that debt relief program.
The President, the Minister of Finance have appealed to the German visitors to support Ghana in convincing China to come to the table. We are ready to do that. We already are in that. At the same time, I would like to encourage all Ghanaians who have strong ties with China, who are doing nice business with China, to also engage them and convince them that it's time to sit down with all the other creditors and agree on a package. Time is of the essence. Time is running out. Without this agreement with the bilateral creditors, the IMF package is in severe danger. So, if there's any Ghanaian member of Parliament listening who is very much engaged with business in China, please make best use in the interest of Ghana and the people in Ghana. I said Germany is prepared to help. And there's another criterion, and that is that we, of course, expect that Ghana itself, the government of Ghana, is taking the important steps that are needed to move this country, to move the people, the families out of this crisis. And there are important steps to take. On the revenue collection side, it's about property tax collection. It's on the expenditure side. It's about, basically it's about the energy sector. And of course, government spending in total. So there's an important homework to be done here. And we encourage the government to take all the necessary steps in due course. With all that together, we are quite confident that Ghana can find a way out of this severe financial crisis. But as I mentioned, time is more of the essence than ever before. And I encourage all stakeholders in this process to do their very best to come to a conclusion in a very, very timely fashion. Thank you very much. It's on the Minister of Finance to comment on his travel schedule. We just know from past experience in the case of Zambia that China has been, in previous cases, very reluctant to enter into setting up this creditor committee, which is the key decision to take now. And we hear that so far the Ghanaian government has not been successful in reaching out to the relevant authorities in Beijing and to enter into direct talks with them. As I pointed out, we are trying to engage with China, but it is a very China is a big player and has its own agenda, including a complex agenda with Africa. And so I'm afraid it might not only be about Ghana, but it might be about the relations with Africa. And we must be aware that Ghana is not isolated. There are other countries in similar difficulties. And so whatever decision is taken in favor of Ghana, we must be aware that other countries then will ask for the same treatment. And this is what makes it so complex, and this might be the reason why China is so hesitant to move ahead with Ghana. Because they fear that that might then have implications on many other engagements they have with other African countries. As you know, China is one of the major creditors to many countries in very strategic sectors, and at the same time, the Chinese economy is not in best state ever. So that might be part of the complexity in this case. So if we are willing to delay the debt payment from Ghana, what is Ghana using this fiscal space for? And we would consider it as unfair if that would be used to serve the debt to someone who is not willing to be part of the aid package for Ghana. We would think that is not fair, and I think that is also not in the interest of Ghana. So it's not about, it's less.
Well, so that's the latest we're getting from the German ambassador to Ghana, Daniel Krul. But what are the possible opportunities that we could explore out of these revelations that are coming through, especially from the business community? Because the ambassador was clear they're asking the Ghanaian business community to also trigger some talks on the side as the German government works around the clock to equally convince China on that external debt restructuring. I want to bring in two individuals. Dr. Ishmael Honovo is an international relations expert at the University of Education, Winneba, studied at some point in China, I believe. So he has a lot of experience going into that. Dr. Joseph Obeng is president of the Ghana Union of Traders Association, all joining me via Zoom. But let me start off with you, Dr. Joseph Obeng, because this is a passionate appeal, if I may call it that way, to your community. The German ambassador acknowledging that China is not willing at this moment to carry out that debt restructuring program with the Republic of Ghana. And looking at the trade volumes, it appears that the business community will be the way out now. What's your take on the appeal that's coming through from the international community?
Yeah, I think it's in the right direction. Coming from a diplomat like an ambassador to Germany means that maybe there's some kind of precedent in some of these negotiations, even in the European countries. It means, therefore, that we also have to put up an initiative in this regard, the trading community. If you look at the huge volume of Chinese trading community here, the Chinese businesses that is springing up everywhere, it is also in their own interest that we can coordinate with such businesses here and reach out to the Chinese government, because we have reached a state that we need this debt forgiveness so that government can have some respite, and also to pave the way for IMF also to be able to implement the deal with Ghana. So it is very important. And much as the only problem is that we do not have the precedent yet, and you know China is very straight in its dealings, such as this. Sometimes you have to channel your grievances through your government. And so we'll find out a lot, we'll find out questions and find out some answers to some of these questions, and then find a way to partner with the Chinese businesses here and other stakeholders, including AGI and Chamber of Commerce and all that. If that will be, if that is a possibility, then we do not have to wait and then proceed to fund all possible avenues to complement the efforts of government to have this debt restructuring.
Okay, then I was just about to go there, just to inquire from you what sorts of relations or channels you've created with the Chinese business community. For instance, on the side of Guta, do you have some associations, some business groups that you belong to that may be critical to this external debt restructuring with China?
Yeah, we have direct access to their embassy, and this is how far we can go. But to talk of reaching out to the government itself. But once their embassy is here, it's the same way. Whatever thing that we're able to negotiate or be able to convincingly tell them will be communicate to their government. So I think it's a good call coming from the ambassador. And I believe that in negotiations like this, the business community also have a role. And maybe it has happened to the German government before. That's why he's calling on the business community to also put its weight on this effort to convince China to help us to forgive our debts.
I guess he was speaking about the trade volumes, the fact that we import so much from China. Don't you feel that, first of all, that's part of the challenge we're facing as a country? The fact that you, the traders, are part of why we are here today. If we're not trading as much with China, they wouldn't have mattered, been of importance to us.
Trading is global. Even Germany is trading more with China, more than China. If you look at the balance of trade, it's always in favor of China, even regarding to the US and the bigger countries. So we cannot say that we will not trade. We will trade, but in this particular thing, we have a relationship with China that goes back to the era of our first president, and that this relationship have grown in stature to the extent that now the trading that we do with China is also helping China. So sometimes the bigger partner should be able to come to the rescue of the smaller partner. We have a relationship, no doubt about that. So we cannot, China or the bigger countries cannot pretend not to come to the rescue of their smaller partners. And we should find a way as a business community to also influence the Chinese government, knowing the kind of role that we also play in the economy through trading, as you have already said. But the fact that we trade does not mean that it is the major effect of the problem that we are having as a country. Every country do trading, and we are also trying to learn through trading, learn the ways of China, so that we can also manufacture.
Okay, so you're not
able to do.
You're not admitting the fact that you're part of the problem and that you're contributing to that high import bill from China.
Definitely, excessive importation is not good for the country, and I've always been saying this, and I've said that even the local share in this program is very negligible. And then the bigger problem even comes from the expatriates, which includes the Chinese themselves. Look at the volume of the dumping that they do here. They do dump all manner of things here. So sometimes if you have to go in that tangent, we can also say that they are also part of this problem. Because they import the highest volume into the country as compared to the indigents. Our share in the importation, the whole importation, is about less than 20% even. And they do the bulk of it. And that's why we are saying that if it comes to this, that we have to influence the Chinese government, we'll do that with their business people here. And they can do it better even with us.
Are you set to do that? Let's talk about what will happen. Will you accept that challenge and begin talks? Will you open negotiations with the Chinese business community here in Ghana?
If the need arises, now the call has just begun with the German ambassador, and then all the stakeholders, not only Guta, will have to think, because it is in our own interest that the government also have some respect, because we are being choked with this debt. And that's, if you're able to do that, it will go a longer way to help boost business activities in this country.
Okay.
So the benefit will go to us, the indigents, and also to these expatriates, especially the Chinese that are here. And so if the need arises, we have to reach out to them, whether we like it or not, and find a prudent way to use them to lobby through themselves to their government.
Okay, I'll be interested in knowing the experience dealing with Chinese officials, but just hold on for me, Dr. Obeng. Let's also bring in Dr. Ishmael Honvo, who's an international relations expert. And Doc, you've had an experience in China, so you know how the systems operate there and how, of course, the government officials there would behave. Are you surprised by this fact that our Ghanaian authorities are not able to establish any firm relations or connections with the relevant authorities that will open these negotiations on our external debt relief? Doc, if you can hear me, you would first of all have to unmute, but I'm asking that, given your experience in China, are you surprised, first of all, that we're not even able to commence the negotiations as of now on the external debt restructuring? Okay, it appears we're having some challenges connecting with Dr. Ishmael over there. But Dr. Obeng, you're still with us, and I was just asking about your experience dealing with Chinese authorities. I mean, you ply your trade there, your members often go to China. Do you see a possibility, looking at the posture of the Chinese government, that this will be an easy task for us as a nation?
Yeah, that's why I initially said that Chinese are very strict and very stringent in some of these things. And they have their ways of doing some of these things. And we have to ask the necessary questions as to how to go through this. We do not have the precedent in the first place. We have not even done it as a business community to go pleading to the international community, let alone the Chinese. So if we have to do that, then we have to seek for some answers to some questions that we require to know. Otherwise, we'll be chasing the wind because they are very strict and their dealings are very different from the Western, and that we have to find out how to go about this. But that's why I'm saying that the best way to do this is to go through their businesses here, and that we can reach out to them, and then we also go through their embassy. Because for that, we have unlimited, unhindered access to their embassy, and that we can communicate. But as to how the processes will go, it will follow from there.
Okay, but now there's something that's certain: the fact that we're not getting it easy with China. 1.7 billion US dollars at stake now, and that in fact has a wider implication in terms of our ability to go ahead with the IMF bailout. As a business community, you must be worried about this, isn't it?
Definitely, because we are all expecting this bailout. And if you, given the timelines, we're expecting that by March we'd have heard some good news. So if this becomes a stumbling block, then definitely we will not be happy about it at all. And that's why it is necessary that if this call from the German ambassador is anything to go by, then we have to take it very serious as soon as practicable. To start reaching to the Chinese government through the businesses here and our association with them.
Right, and I recall that when all of this started, you issued a statement asking government to implement some recommendations from the position of Gutta that will help in our economic recovery. We'll get to that shortly, but let's hear from Dr. Ishmael Honvo as well. And Doc, Thank you for joining us. Doc is now on the telephone lines. And Doc, the point about your experience in China, I was just asking about that because you've had the opportunity to be there before. Looking at their society, their governance architecture, is it surprising to you that our authorities are not able to even commence negotiation on this external debt relief?
Okay. Good afternoon to you and your viewers. It is not surprising that at this point, we have not been able to make any breakthrough in terms of contact with the Chinese government. Remember that the Chinese have their New Year somewhere in February, and therefore within 2 or 3 weeks, normally, business and other activities will come to a halt in the whole of China to allow them to celebrate their Chinese New Year. And therefore, it depends on the time that the government of Ghana started to make the appeal or started to make effort to contact the Chinese. If it is just within this period of February, then you may run into some challenges because of their peculiar cultural and social arrangements that allow them to do certain things within certain periods.
Okay, so what you're saying is that usually you wouldn't find Chinese authorities sitting down to do anything within February to March?
Yes, normally society virtually comes to a standstill to allow them to celebrate their Chinese New Year. But then that also depends on at which point we make contact to have a sort of negotiation. If it is not before that period, then it will always be a little bit difficult to make contact within the period where they are celebrating their New Year. Everything will be concentrated on domestic issues. And remember that the Chinese themselves are having problems still with COVID. So they'll be dealing with some of these domestic issues during that period, making sure that while the people celebrate their Chinese New Year, they don't end up spreading the virus and so forth and so on. So you may not necessarily make a lot of inroads during that period because of what the festivities and all those kind of things. But again, even if you make contact with the Chinese officials, you must remember that China does not operate like within the G20 framework, where they are clearly laid down rules and structures for debt cancellation and debt forgiveness. What has happened over the years is that if you look at Chinese debt cancellation and restructuring, they normally do it at their own terms. Indeed, most of the debt that they have cancelled and forgiven are debts that are zero interest loans, which are nearing maturation. So in 2019, for instance, about 27 countries that were cancelled. But if you scrutinize those loans, they were those loans that are virtually during getting to maturation, and there are something small left on them. But our situation is a little bit complicated because of commercial lending. Normally, it is quite difficult to get the Chinese to agree to restructure the commercial one. So, but that does not also imply that Ghana cannot make a breakthrough. Remember, China as a lender has lent to so many of the developing countries, and therefore any debt restructuring agreement with any of these debtor nations will automatically translate to you having to agree a similar term to other nations. So we must put all these variables together and then ask the relevant question after the point that our officials were making the contact. Because when this whole program started, I think that what we are doing, the domestic debt exchange, we should at the same time be also looking at the international level. But it seems that we were concentrated on getting the domestic deal done. Then we can now engage the international creditors. And remember, there's this process underway to get a sort of debt relief for all these countries that are in debt distress, including Zambia. So within that framework, yes, the G20 framework, the Paris Club, as we call them, it is easier to do because it's clearly structured. But China does not operate within that framework. So yes, any negotiation with them will be a little bit more complex than those Western and traditional donors.
If I'm to go by what you're telling us now, I'm afraid you're telling us that government's target of hitting or assessing the IMF conditionalities by the first quarter of this year may be delayed.
Yes, because we have not made contact yet with our largest creditor, and these negotiations take time. Remember, the Chinese economy itself is not in that good state, and therefore any debt rescheduling on the negotiation we also have implications for them. But again, we must look at it from the perspective that in the nature of relation that with the Chinese in terms of our trade and other commercial interests, if we are not able to restructure our debts and we are pushed to the wall, it may not order well for the Chinese business interest in Ghana. So yes, on that premise, we may achieve some breakthrough, but the time frame within which we are working may not allow the Chinese may not allow us to engage the Chinese for them to consider the proposals we have. Because remember, you cannot push them to accept whatever you are presenting. In any case, you have to do your homework properly before you even engage them. If you listen to the German ambassador very well, there are still issues domestically that have been addressed. That is, one of it is in the power sector, where we are still accumulating debt. So we still have a lot of work to do domestically to be able to convince some of the creditor nations that we are ready for the bailout.
This is just developing, but we're grateful, Dr. Ishmael Lonvo, for joining us. Dr. Joseph Obeng, and that's where I want to round off this conversation on about the way forward, because I recall last year you issued that communique to government asking them to take a raft of measures that will safeguard the Ghanaian economy. That of course, was not heeded. Here we are today. So where do we go from here?
I think fundamentally we have to restructure some of the things that we do, and that is even more important than this bailout things that we are doing. Because if you go for bailouts and we still do the same old things that we're doing, we will achieve nothing.
Anyway,
and that will necessarily take us out of this mess that we have in.
Anyway, I'm grateful. P.S. We lost the very last word, but thank you for joining us here on The Pulse.